Why does filming always make me burp? Hey BookTube, welcome to my November wrap-up, which I will be splitting into 2 parts because this is my channel
and you all just watch it.
Part 1 of my wrap-up, which you will get today, is going to be a wrap-up of the books that I did not enjoy and did not finish this month, right? And part 2 is going to be a wrap-up of all the books that I did finish and how I liked those, how I felt about those, right? But I felt like it was important to split these up because I'm kind of in 2 different headspaces when I talk about things I enjoyed and then things that I didn't finish. So I did want to split it up. Now, when it comes to books, I am a mood reader. And I don't mind having to put a book down for a few days because it's not what I'm interested in reading, right? I kind of go through waves. At any given time, I'm usually reading about 2 or 3 different books in different formats, just so I kind of have options to pick from, right? Usually I'm cycling through a physical book, an ebook, maybe a graphic novel, maybe an audiobook, just so I have different options. At the same time, I am not someone who is going to force myself to read something that I'm not enjoying. Obviously, there are books that have slow starts, right? Maybe books that have some pacing issues, and I get that. I'd make it 25% of the way through a book. Because I figure after the first fourth of a book, if I'm not invested in the characters or the story or the plot or some aspect of this story, some aspect of this work, then it is not a work for me. And I don't have a problem with that. So because of that, in this November, I had 4 books that I did not finish for a variety of different reasons. Book number 1 was Rani Patel in Full Effect. This book is a prime example of a growing movement that I support of authors giving content warnings at the beginning of their books. What I thought was going to be a nice story about rap and female empowerment ended up being a story about a girl who is dealing with the fallouts of drug addiction, sexual assault, incest, sexual abuse, rape, adultery, like every literally single thing down the list is in this book, and it just really came out of nowhere. And these are topics that books deal with, but if I had known what this book actually was, I wouldn't have picked it up. Personally. Another issue that I had with the book was it just seemed unfinished. The depictions, particularly the racial depictions of people, just seemed really weird. Like the white love interest was described as, quote, looking like Tupac, but white. The book also had a lot of slang, which is fine. Like you're more than welcome to use slang in books, right? And you can either explain it or, kind of provide context clues if you don't want to define it outright. Elizabeth Acevedo is really good about using Spanish slang and Spanish in her books and then kind of presenting context clues afterwards to show what she meant by that if you don't speak Spanish without just kind of translating it word for word. So I really like how she does it. Sonia Patel, the author, her decision was to include a glossary in the back of the book that translated the words, which is fine, but she didn't include all of the words in the glossary. Some were in the glossary and some weren't. And it just really didn't make any sense because it's like if you're gonna go to the length of making a glossary, either put all the words in it or don't put the word. I don't know. It just seems so, like, what was the point? What was the point? I think that was my whole thing with this novel. Like, what was the point? Like, if you are a psychiatrist, like she is, and you have at the end of your book an author's note that says the way that this main character processes trauma and responds to trauma is not accurate and is not healthy, and you put that like in between the acknowledgments page, like what I did. The next book that I read and did not finish was Danielle Clayton's The Bells. This book has definitely some pacing issues at the beginning, which was something that I saw on Goodreads, but everybody was like, just power through the beginning and then it's worth it at the end. So I was ready to, it was slow, but I was ready. But I did the audiobook version of this book. And I think that is where my issue was, because it is very, very clear from the author, from the cover, from the descriptions in the book that Camilla is a Black woman who lives in a kingdom that is clearly French inspired, right? So this French Black woman, her story and her thoughts were narrated by a white British woman. So it just, I don't know, there just seemed to be a disconnect there. And I didn't feel like the audiobook I was listening to was very representative of how Camila would actually act. The audiobook narrator also had this habit of putting emphasis on every single word. I do actually plan on going back to The Bells in a physical or ebook version. The audiobook version was just not for me. The third book that I did not finish this month was Ghost Boys. Ghost Boys follows a young Black boy named Jerome, and the book is split into two alternating sections, one called Alive, which follows Jerome and his family and his friends in the events that lead up to his murder at the hands of a police officer, and Dead, which is where Jerome is a ghost after his death, kind of tethered to the earth and seeing how his death has impacted his friends and family. There are numerous references made throughout the novel to Tamir Rice, because both Tamir Rice and Jerome were young Black boys who were playing with toy guns at the time of their death. So it's very, very intentional. And I actually started to read this book on the anniversary, if you can call it that, of Tamir Rice's murder. So that fact was not lost on me, and I was very intrigued by this book. And I was also intrigued by the premise where, as a ghost boy, Jerome comes into contact with the ghost of Emmett Till. There's a boy that's clearly Emmett Till, but a fourth of the way through, we hadn't talked to him or really interacted with him, which seemed a little strange because his presence was very heavily featured in the blurb. Every character that wasn't Jerome just seemed very one-dimensional, and you're only really getting Jerome's thoughts, you know? So that could be part of it, but every character was very one-dimensional, which made it difficult for me to care about how they were feeling. Because the one character that I was attached to, being Jerome, you know what happens to him. You know that he has been killed. I'm not as invested in how his parents feel about his death because I'm not as invested in his parents. Which sounds really sad to say. and I feel really bad saying that because this is such an important novel and such a powerful novel, but I just think that so much work was put into Jerome, and that work was not kind of replicated in the people around him. But I probably could have powered through this, right, if these were really my only issues, but my biggest issue was with the audiobook version, again, which is what I listened to. Basically, there would be an edit and a cut, right? So basically, like, the actor had been saying a line, and then he redid the line, and then they cut it in. Which I get it. That's, you know, that's, I cut things in my video, that's fine. But it was very jarring because the edits and the cuts would come like in the middle of the sentence or sometimes in the middle of a word. So the inflection was kind of all over the place. The tone was kind of all over the place. And it kind of took you out of anything that you were feeling when all of a sudden, like, I don't know, just like the word was different and the sentence was different. I just couldn't listen to it anymore. So I just couldn't make it through. It was not a well-produced audiobook. The last book that I did not finish reading this November was Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe. Now, this is the book that I was very excited to read. It had been on my Libby audiobook hold for like 6 weeks, so I was really excited. The audiobook was narrated by Lin-Manuel Miranda. You know, I was really excited. And then I realized about 25% of the way through, this was just not a book for me. The story follows Aristotle and Dante, who are both 15-year-old boys. They are not the philosophers. They are just both, they just both have those names, and that's kind of a connecting point with them. And they're just boys who kind of become friends. You know, and it's a very moving character study of their friendship. But it just seemed to me, this is a very, very slow, low-key book. And if you are someone who is interested in that I recommend it, right? Because the book was well written. Aristotle is so, he's so angry and he's so hurt. And I think it's a very, very raw and emotional portrait of what it's like to be a teenage boy, which is why I really wanted to like it. But it was just nothing was happening for me. Nothing. Not a thing. Like Aristotle gets sick, like he has like a bad flu or something, and that's like the plot of 5 chapters. And there were starting to be hints of Aristotle having more than platonic feelings for Dante, which is what I was more interested in, and kind of seeing how their relationship developed. But it just did not seem to be happening, and I kind of got to the point where I was like, I'm just not feeling this. So I put it down, and then my rental was up, and I was like, I don't want to renew this. But those are the 4 books that I did not finish reading this month. Woo! Let me know if you also did not finish any books this month, or if there are any books that I just mentioned that you also didn't finish, or if there are any books that I just mentioned that I'm totally wrong about and you're like, Cheyenne, what is wrong with you? You need to start over and get this book and quit BookTube forever because you're a fool. Because I think that every day. So until part 2 of this video, I will see you in part 2. And until then, I will be here in the Lo-Fi Book Cafe.